Welcome everybody to the latest episode of the One of One Card Show. No, that wasn't the Lily doll. I want to welcome everybody. My name is Luke and I'm your host. And in this week's episode, we are going to be taking a look at some of the scariest and spookiest WWE cards to ever be released. Let's get things started. So, over the course of professional wrestling history, there have been loads and loads of scary and spooky events and gimmicks that have happened. I'm thinking of like in the mid 1990s WCW, the Yeti showing up at Halloween Havoc, trying to attack Hulk Hogan and being there with the giant Big Show Paul White. I'm thinking of Shayna Baszler having her feud with essentially the Lily doll rather than almost Alexa Bliss. I am thinking of some wild events and some pretty scary and spooky gimmicks in wrestlers over the course of this history. So, in this week's episode, we are going to be looking at some of those cards that feature these sorts of wrestlers. So, let's kick things off. But first, though, we want to make sure we are subscribing to the One of One Card Show on YouTube, and we're also checking out the One of One Cards channel on Instagram as well. So, the very first thing we want to look at is the 2025 Topps Finest WWE Dark Energy Case Hit insert. This is definitely one of the more rarer cards to have come out from Topps in recent memory, and it is certainly one of the more fancy case hits that's also very spooky and scary too. And they're also very, very hard to find. One in every 67 packs, and there's 10 cards in this case hit set. So let's take a look. The very first two that we're looking at over here is the Boogeyman. The Boogeyman from the mid 2000s era WWE. His card is definitely one of the weaker selling cards in this, and it goes for about $100. But it should come of no surprise that one of the better selling of the Dark Energy case hits is the Fiend Bray Wyatt that sells for about $250 to $350. And the thing that I really like about these cards is definitely the atmospheric vibe that's in the background of like the red smoke going on in these respective cards, along with the frenetic dark energy font that is placed up top. It's definitely looks like something that would be in like the a dungeon, the bottom of a basement, that sort of thing, and in like a horror movie. So these are definitely cards that stand out to me. We can also see that the Demon Finn Balor having his card go for about $200 on average right now. Jake the Snake is definitely one of the lesser selling cards here, which is going for about $100 to $150. Also, Demon Finn Balor can never forget what happened with that storyline with Roman Reigns. Looked like for a moment he was going to be the person, which we knew he wasn't going to win, but it looked like he was going to be the person to pin Roman Reigns for the Universal title, and the ring ropes just fell. We never found out what happened with that one. That was kind of strange. Next up, we have Kane. That's gotta be Kane. Well, Kane is obviously a pretty popular figure, going for about $200. Mankind with maybe the best photo in the entire Dark Energy case hit. We have going for only about $100 to $150. I love the pose of him, and certainly shows that he is, going through a lot in his, home of the Boiler Room. That's for sure. Then we have Paul Bearer. Oh, yes. Well, his card goes for about $130 to $180. And Papa Shango, who looks like he is just a few moments away from, having the Ultimate Warrior have some green stuff coming down his face. Yeah, his card goes for about $100. Then we have the Undertaker, who's probably the most sought after person, I would say, from this set, going for about $200 to $250. And then Wyatt Six stable, going for about a $180 to about $215. So these are case hits. These are, relatively rare cards. It says, what, if my memory serves me correctly, one in every 67 packs. So they are certainly not a common card definitely. I'm a little bit surprised, by the way, that they didn't do one of one superfractors or any bit of parallels. I know that's up for debate, and I had mentioned it before. Some of these case hits and stuff they have been doing superfractors of, but they didn't choose to do them for the dark energy. I'm kind of surprised because I think that would have certainly popped. But nonetheless, these are quite interesting and unbelievable cards that we're seeing so far from 2025 finest WWE. Next up, we're going to move to Papa Shango. We know Papa Shango was just featured a few moments ago from the Dark Energy insert, but then we have Papa Shango in his early years in the early 90s, making an appearance. He would later become, Kama, the Supreme Fighting Machine. He would later become the Godfather, the Good Father, among other people. But we have, Papa Shango early on with his mystical, mysterious voodoo vibe going on. And some of his cards do go for, a decent amount in like, raw stuff. So his 1992 Merlin WWF Gold Series still sells for like a little bit less than $25. And then he does have a very, very cool card with the flames on the right. Where it's a 1993 Merlin WWF Gold Series, and it's a German card that ends up selling for about $15. I think it's a pretty cool design, pretty cool set. And that ended up popping up as well in this card. It looks like it's a little bit bigger. It's called the 1992 WWF Quartets. Through my research on this is definitely one of the first times I'm seeing this. But these cards can go, they're certainly listed for quite a bit of money. They're listed for like $250 in very high grade PSA 10 copies. I'm not sure if anybody's actually going to be paying for it, but yeah, listed for $250. But again, it's a pretty cool set, pretty cool design in terms of how it looks. So yeah, I definitely approve of it, and it is certainly spooky and scary, that's for sure. We also see over here, we have the Undertaker. Now, the Undertaker has a whole bunch of different cards that would certainly be considered scary and spooky, but I'm going to be considering his early years, the 1991 Merlin WWF. Now, when I did my Undertaker video about the Undertaker's history through trading cards, this was the card that stood out to me as being one of the Undertaker's all-time greatest cards. I know that it's definitely not like his most expensive card by any means, but this is certainly one of his coolest looking cards ever in terms of photos that was chosen. It's just unbelievable. Him with the coffin, with the candles in the background, his pose with the flowers and everything. When you were thinking of somebody who's supposed to be this scary and spooky Undertaker, this is the card to go for. You can get raw and low grade copies for literally like $10 to $20. And if you wanted to get like, a high grade one, you're looking at about, 75 and up for like, SGC 9 and above. But if you did want to get, autograph versions, they can go, because Undertaker autographs, they command a pretty high premium. They can go for like $250 and up. But overall, I think this is a really cool card for sure. I definitely think that if you're an Undertaker fan and you want a card, this would be the one to go for. Um, Next up, we have another one. We were just talking moments ago about the WWF quartets, and what pops up but an Undertaker card of him coming out of a coffin. Again, this is certainly a spooky card, and these go for about $85 if you want to get like a graded PSA 8. They do sell for a decent amount, in the cards. But again, it's just a very, very cool card, very cool design, and you gotta love the Undertaker's pose of him giving that dreaded look like he is about to deliver you a tombstone pile driver after giving you a choke slam. So yeah, definitely a cool card. I like that a lot. Now, continuing with the Undertaker, Undertaker has what's called from the Undertaker Career Die Cuts card from Tops from just a couple of years ago, and it is a insert set that chronicles the Undertaker's success through the years, from start to finish, from Survivor Series 1990 all the way to his phenomenal ending at WrestleMania 36 in early 2020. So if we see from 2021 Finest WWE, it chronicles Undertaker's career. Some of these cards, especially in the Superfractors, because there are parallels in this one. Superfractor one of ones from the Dead Man Returns. It's his return at WrestleMania 20 when he ended up defeating Kane. That one ended up selling for $911 in August 2025 in a PSA 9, and a raw, ungraded version of his Royal Rumble match win is Superfractor 101, ended up going for $800 in December 2024. So this is again a very, very cool design. I love how it's a die cut in the tombstone style. Very, very nice. Very cool design. But let's say you don't want to spend, $800 or $900 on a Superfractor one of one. You can certainly go on the lower end of things and get, for just the base cards for about $5. Gotta love that pose of the lightning fright Royal Rumble appearance from Undertaker selling for about $5. And then you gotta love, Undertaker from the Boneyard match at the phenomenal ending from WrestleMania 36, also going for about $5. Very cool design. Again, when you think of Undertaker, you're thinking of like the tombstones and all that stuff. Cool, cool card. I really, really like these. Also, very scary. Now, when you think of a scary wrestler, you gotta be thinking of Kane. That's gotta be Kane. And this is definitely one of Kane's most scariest cards over here. It's the 2023 Panini Impeccable WWE, the indelible ink. And if you want to go for like the out of 75, and one of these sold for $172.50 in October 2025. But if you were going for the platinum one of one, which is a absolute fire card, we're looking at $760 and a little bit more in November 2024. So that is definitely one of the cooler looking cards for WWE, and probably one of the coolest looking cards for Kane that I have ever seen. He almost looks like, when the slasher flick movie villains, we're thinking of like a Jason or something along the lines of that, with the mask and just the red lighting that's just all on his face. It is just, a very scary card. Great photograph for sure. In addition to that, one of the cards that stood out to me when I was doing research is this one right here. Now, obviously, it's the number one SmackDown title card from the 1999 Comic Images WWF SmackDown set. Um, this is a card that goes for about $2. But when I'm thinking of like an atmospheric card, this is one of Kane in the background of the flames going off when he's just appearing into the ring for the first time, for the first time of the night. That is a very, very cool card, and it just really captures WWE from the late 90s attitude era of, Kane being this dominant big red machine, someone who is absolutely, an absolute monster. That's a very, very cool card, very underrated photograph that's being used by WWE. Some of these cards from the late 90s, WWE cards, do contain some unbelievable photos, as we will see coming up. And one of them is this right here. When you're thinking of the late 90s, although he was never somebody who was like, one of the biggest wrestlers or something like that in WWE from the late 90s Attitude Era, Gangrel is somebody who is just quite fascinating to me. He certainly had the look and had one of the greatest theme songs, by the way, in WWE history. With bow 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 bow. Yeah, he's got some cool stuff going on. And the 1999 Comic Images, once again, they have both chromium version for some of the cards, as well as just the base paper version. These sell for less than $5. That is one of the cooler images. I mean, he's got the vampire, teeth, the fangs sticking out. He's just got a cool pose, the candles, the smoke, the blue background. I mean, that is a great looking card right there. Great looking photo for sure. That is a card that, if you're a wrestling fan and just a fan of wrestling trading cards, one would want to, go for something like that. And they don't go for a lot of money either, but that just absolutely pops for sure. And if we want to continue the trend as well, you cannot forget that Gangrel had his Brood stable as well, with Edge and Christian among other people. Look at that card over there. Again, if you want to capture a pretty darn cool stable from the late 90s, the Brood was certainly one that stood out to you. And, again, they were never like the biggest stable during that time period, but that is just such a cool card in terms of what they were going for and what they were presenting as, these three vampiric, people, walking down the stage. If only they had that, the blood that they would occasionally release, that would have been even cooler in that photo for the card. Let's now continue to the Boogeyman. The Boogeyman makes an appearance from the 2006 Topps Chrome Heritage WWE set. This is a card that goes for, under $5. It's not the biggest card in the world, but man, if we think of somebody who's spooky and scary, we would be thinking of the Boogeyman. Look at him with the worms coming out of his mouth and that, the face paint and everything. He's certainly somebody who may, while he was never really anybody all that big of a wrestler, he did have like feud with like Booker T and stuff. Certainly somebody who, made his mark with the limited amount of time that he had in WWE, that's for sure. So let's move on now to the Firefly Funhouse era of WWE. When I think of spooky and scary, I am thinking of the Fiend Bray Wyatt in his Firefly Funhouse. Just one of the better gimmicks of the last decade or so, where you have this, children's TV show, Mr. Rogers-esque character who, is telling all these funny jokes with all these puppets and stuff, and then out of the blue would have like the fiend presence that's lurking and looming in the background. Well, there's a lot of cool and scary and spooky cards connected to him. And we have two of them right here coming from Topps Now, of all things, 2019 and 2020 Topps Now. We have card number 46, which is The Fiend defeating Bray Wyatt at SummerSlam 2019. That was his first match as The Fiend Bray Wyatt, certainly making his mark coming out with that unbelievable mask, one of the cooler masks in WWE in pro wrestling history for sure. And then on top of that, maybe an even scarier and spookier card, you cannot forget that at Super Showdown back in 2020, the Fiend Bray Wyatt ended up losing the Universal Championship to Bill Goldberg, who the plan was that Bill Goldberg was going to go on and face off against Roman Reigns, but that never ended up happening because of COVID. And then Braun Strowman ended up actually being the one to defeat Bill Goldberg. That was such a, strange time in WWE. But that card number 11 from Super Showdown Topps Now 2020, sells for $63 most recently in June of 2025. So that's kind of unbelievable when you think about it. It's certainly I would say, one of the worst booking decisions in recent memory for WWE of the last 5 years or so. But my goodness, yeah, $63. That's a spooky and scary event for sure. Next up, we have a pretty cool card right here. That's the 2021 Topps Undisputed WWE Rob Schamberger sketch art card. You have the base card of this base version of this selling for about $40 to $50. Again, that's the drawing of the artist Rob right there, who's done a lot of WWE art and stuff. Great work from him all over the place. But if you were to go for an autograph version of that, now the autograph is numbered out of 10. And it is a sticker auto, though. So please be aware of that. It is a sticker autograph, but it doesn't seem to matter because obviously, Bray Wyatt autograph is something that people are going to be seeking out. And especially in a card like this of him as the Fiend, $950 it was sold for in August of 2025. So yeah, that's certainly a hot card to go after, definitely. And now, when we think of spooky, just of a card that really represents who the Fiend Bray Wyatt was, of him with the lantern and everything. You cannot forget about the 2024 Prism WWE, the Black Color Blast card. That is a card that certainly pops when I think of scary, when I think of spooky, of him walking with the fiend mask on. Very, very awesome looking card. An unbelievable selection for the photo. Definitely a card, even though it sells for $700, but definitely a card that people are going to be seeking out over time. That's for sure. Now, if we want to get into the Firefly Funhouse, now these are some things that I've seen the last couple of years, and I was always blown away that they ended up making them. The 2021 Top Slam Attacks WWE cards. It's a trading card game. I've never played it. I do not know exactly how one would play it, but they actually have some of the Firefly Funhouse characters in it, and I think it's kind of unbelievable that they included some of these. You can get like these cards for pretty cheap prices, like less than $5. You get Mercy the Buzzard for $5 or less. It doesn't look like they're a pretty strong character in these games as well, with a 26 attack and 10 defense. They have Abby the Witch for also less than $5. Cannot forget about Huskus the Pig Boy for selling about less than $5. And also Ramblin' Rabbit, who was by far my favorite character from the Firefly Funhouse. Again, for about $5 or less. And then we cannot forget about one of the most spooky characters, and that was the boss, who is certainly looks a little similar to a guy named Vincent McMahon, Vincent Kennedy McMahon, Mr. McMahon. Yeah, the boss. He looks a lot like him, I would say. But yeah, you can get that card for about $5 or less as well. Now, we cannot forget that one of the major players in the Firefly Funhouse era of Bray Wyatt during 2020 going into 2021 was Alexa Bliss. And as a result, Alexa Bliss has some very spooky, some very scary, some very unbelievable cards connected to that era as well. And you get like the 2021 Topps Heritage card for about $2. It's an unbelievable design from early 90s Topps with, a great photo of Alexa Bliss from that Firefly Funhouse period. You cannot forget about the 2022 Panini Select WWE Concourse card from the Concourse, level. That is a very, very cool design, especially in the zebra prism. PSA 10 of that sold for, $406 in June of 2025. Because as we know, the zebras are one of the most sought after and most, unbelievable looking parallels from that. But again, you can get probably the base card for, just a couple dollars, that's for sure. And then in addition to that, we have the ringside version of the 2022 Select, and we have the Zebra Prism in that, which was sold for $230 in April of 2025. And again, we just have a great visual, great photo, great all-out design of the Zebra Prism that really, really enhances that card overall. But and I can see why people would want to be spending that amount for that sort of card. So, I want to know, which WWE wrestler do you think is the spookiest or scariest in history? What card do you think is the scariest or spookiest that we've seen here so far? Is there any of them that I'm missing? Do you think there's anything out there that I may have missed or I should have touched upon in greater detail? You let me know in the comments section. Be sure once again to like and subscribe to the One of One Cards channel on YouTube. And also check out my One of One Cards channel on Instagram. Everybody, you have a wonderful day and happy Halloween.